Welcome to the Building Up Women in Property podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca Bangura, and I'm thrilled to have you join us today. Whether you're a woman aiming to become a confident, impactful leader, or you're a leader committed to promoting gender equity in the property and construction industry, this podcast is designed specifically for you. Join me every week to gain insights and inspiration that will leave you excited and confident about taking your next steps. Thank you for tuning in. Now let's dive into today's topic. This morning, I was at boot camp and we were celebrating with my trainer, Justin, that he has been in business for 14 years as a personal trainer. That's no small feat, right? Given that most businesses don't make it past 4 years, to have that type of longevity, particularly through COVID and the pandemic, is really remarkable. And what I love is that Justin also has, this group of people who have been on this journey with him the whole time. He has been training some of these people for 14 years. So I asked him, what are the keys to your success? Or what are your top tips for success? And he said, don't let the highs get too high and don't let the lows get too low, which I think is great advice because I know from personal experience how easy it is to fall prey to our emotions, particularly when things aren't going well, to almost spiral downwards. And what we need to be doing is showing up consistently, with persistence, with resilience, and doing the work day in, day out, regardless of whether it's a good day or a bad day, regardless of how we feel or how motivated we are, we need to just show up and keep doing the work. And I think that is true in our careers, in our personal lives, as parents, as carers, as friends, or as small business owners, to remember that we need to be able to show up and do the work, irrespective of how we feel, and to not indulge too much in the highs or the lows. Now, the other thing Justin said to me was, have you seen Roger Federer's speech at Dartmouth? And I hadn't, but I came home and I Googled, and I'll link to it in the show notes because it is worth watching. Who doesn't love Roger Federer? But it also ties in really nicely with this theme around persistence. And I know last week we were talking about if we want to be exceptional, if we want to really move from good to great, we have to set a different standard for ourselves. We need to show up. We need to commit to doing the work and getting the repetition in so that we can really stand out, so we can really differentiate ourselves and our performance from others. But it can often be very hard to apply in our own lives because we want to see results and we live in a world of instant gratification, having to do all the work. And we want to avoid the discomfort and the awkwardness and the failures that come with growth. But we can't have one without the other, right? And this is why that ability to recover from our setbacks and our screw-ups and adapt to change and circumstance, even in the face of adversity, is so important because we cannot become great at anything until we build the skill. It's like wanting to sit down at piano and play a piano concerto without ever having practiced. We know that we need to put the time in and the practice to build on our skills until we develop that excellence and that mastery. The practice is often boring, it is often hard, it is unglamorous, and it involves getting things wrong and making mistakes. But that is part of the journey. Federer said this, he said, effortless is a myth. It can be really frustrating on the court. Everyone says, he barely broke a sweat. But of course, that is his mastery coming into play. And that is because of the countless work that has gone in behind the scenes to get that good. And if we want to be at the top of our game for anything, it requires us to outwork those around us. It requires us to push through the self-doubt and to try things and see what works and see what doesn't and keep being curious and learning and growing. And if we want to be excellent, it often requires us to outwork our colleagues, to build our skill sets. It requires us to push past the self-doubt and the negative chatter and embracing the journey or embracing the process of becoming a leader. It is not something that happens overnight. It is a compounding effect and it takes time. It takes repetition. It takes commitment. The other thing Federer said that really struck me was when he was talking about his statistics in the game. He's won almost 80% of his games across his career. But when you look at the points, he's only actually won 54% of all the points he plays. As he puts it, even top tennis players barely win more than half the points they play. And I looked at the other tennis greats as well, and their stats are similar, right? They might be leaders in their field, but they still win marginally more than they lose in terms of points. Federer says, you learn that it's just a point, right? You have to play that point and be fully committed to it. It has to be the most important thing in the world in that moment. But once it's behind you, it's behind you. And that is where the persistence tips into resilience. Even on those bad points where we've lost, we need to show up and be focused and committed to the next thing. We need to be looking at the future. We need to be taking those brave steps, even when it feels hard. And it's that ability to show up time and time again. And it's about building that habit. I have a Winston Churchill quote on my desk that says, "Success consists of going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm." And that reminds me that life is a numbers game and that doing the work every day is key. Trying to be an exceptional leader, that is not something that happens overnight. It is not something you learn in a one-day seminar. It is something that you have to practice and hone. And it's the same if you're struggling with juggling work and life, right? I see this all the time in my clients, and I feel it as well as a working parent, this constant feeling that there's more to do and that I'm never able to get everything done. But the only way we get better at that is by having boundaries and practicing them, and by seeing what works in our unique situation and what doesn't, and trying things and having difficult conversations. And irrespective of what we are trying to do in our careers and in our lives, there will be good days and there will be bad days. And we will, by nature of being human, fail time and time again. But once we recognize that that's normal and that's okay, and we let go of that internal guilt and shame that we often feel around not being perfect and not having it all figured out, that's when we can actually learn the most. That is when we can really start to grow so that we can keep being better day in, day out. Once we let go of this idea of being perfect or this expectation of ourselves to do all the things all the time, and instead start focusing on doing what we can do and getting better at it, that's when we can really step up and become great leaders. That is when we can really step up and have the type of impact we want in our work, in our lives, with our families. And in doing so, it also gives us the freedom to enjoy the moment, to enjoy that process of becoming, because we stop wasting energy on trying to resist the process and instead we embrace it. So take the time and get clear for yourself on what is it you want to achieve and why does it matter to you? And then make that commitment to start showing up for yourself, to do the reps, to do the hard work, to experience all the feels, the good, the bad, and make those decisions that are aligned with the person that you aspire to be. We need your voice. We need your impact in the world. And why shouldn't it be you? I want you to go away and think about that and get clear on what it is that drives you or motivates you, and then commit to showing up and being that person and developing the skills to get better and better every day, because that is what will get us from here to where we want to be. Thank you as always for joining me, episode of Building Up Women in Property. Thanks for joining me on the Building Up Women in Property podcast. If you're listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify, I'd love for you to take a moment and review the show if you found it helpful, or share it with a few friends. Thanks again, have a beautiful day, and I'll see you next time.